Thank you everyone for coming, and happy holidays to everyone. I have a tall order because the way I introduced the main theme is an ambitious title. Environmental regeneration equals natural medicine. Leaving the code, return to the ecological garden. And this presentation will focus on the code, return to the garden. This is a code that I've coined as the optimal catalytic course of action for the regeneration of human beings, families, communities, societies, planet Earth, and the building of the new civilization of ecological communities. So as you can see, the code return to the garden is a catalytic instrument. A catalytic instrument refers to processes that develop in one direction and then crystallize, that then become stable. And I used to like this term because it describes a process that if you engage in it, it guides you, it leads you, and it stabilizes processes towards results. In other words, it produces results. And the peaceful revolution, or a peaceful revolution around the garden, with the code return to the garden, to manifest the new civilization of ecological communities, begins within each person. So everything begins from within, and as within, without. Fundamentally, as we learn to identify the principles that operate in nature and learn to apply them to everyday life. So the code return to the garden guides human beings to identify the principles that operate in nature and progressively incorporate them in our daily existence. And we'll go into some details and specifics about that so that everyone becomes enriched and is ready to apply these principles in their lives. I like to introduce an ancient Chinese ideogram. The ancient Chinese ideogram, food is medicine, constitutes the roots upon which we can develop natural health methods. That simple statement, food is medicine. These are the roots upon which we can generate a diverse variety of natural health methods that we can use in our daily lives. And these natural health methods to regenerate ourselves and the environment in which we live. Because it is by human action that we have created a big mess on planet Earth. And if we continue at this pace, it is likely that the human species as we know them, and all the species as we know them, might not be able to sustain themselves. So let us identify and cultivate the fundamental daily practices that we can use to transform ourselves and our communities to optimal levels of health. Let us reflect on the code, return to the garden. What it means is fundamentally going within initially, going to our roots. Because in the garden is a microcosm, but it's a microcosm of the cosmos. The cosmos initially on planet Earth is in a thin layer of life that occurs in the biosphere. This biosphere in which we live is very thin, very fragile. If you compare how thin it is compared to the mass of the Earth, then you become astounded, because it's a very thin layer in which we live. And then we are exposed to the cosmos. Imagine the galaxies that interact and send energy, and this energy impinge on planet Earth is vast. It's a vast panorama out there. It's a cosmos. It's a big cosmos. It's a big universe. And there are multiple universes now, we know through the latest developments in physics, unified field theory. There are multiple universes out there. And we are participants. In other words, we are citizens of the cosmos. And we can say, it is clear we are not alone. We cannot be alone. Can we be alone in this thin layer and the rest of the universe by itself? Clearly not. We have to be in company with many other beings. That is a tautology. That's something that becomes clear. But when we go to the garden, then we have a microcosm. A microcosm in which we participate is there. You can participate and learn fundamentally about life principles. When you start preparing the ground in order to plant, in order to introduce some seeds, then you realize that the quality of that ground is going to have an impact on the growth of the seed. That's obvious. So you begin to think, what can I do to create an optimal terrain, a rich terrain? The matrix upon which the plants are going to grow and develop. And this matrix, this terrain, is similar to the internal terrain that we have as human beings. Our internal terrain fundamentally begins with the food that we eat. The food that we eat is our terrain. We make our terrain, we chew it, we charge it, we put saliva and enzymes, it goes through various processes, and it comes to the gastrointestinal system, and we have our own roots. The villi, the projections in the walls of the intestine, beginning to absorb nutrients. Those are our roots, and we create our terrain. Similarly, in the microcosm of the garden, we have the terrain. We have the terrain right then and there that we can nurture, that we can cultivate, that we can enrich. And by nurturing, cultivating, enriching the terrain, we enrich ourselves. Not only with the food that we bring through the order of nature, but we enrich ourselves through the process, the engagement process, as we participate in the process of cultivating the garden. Furthermore, there is something more to learn about terrain as we human beings develop. We human beings, embryologically, develop 9 months in maternal uterus. 9 months. These 9 months, we are nourished by an internal terrain of the mother. But the internal terrain is fundamentally permeated to the new being through the walls of the uterus, the membrane, the placenta. The placenta, the matrix, is the internal terrain. Through it, we get nourished. And the quality of that terrain in the garden will create a quality of internal blood, internally, the nutrients that we absorb, and the quality of that placenta and the quality of the new being. So by returning to the garden, we can create clean food, optimal food for human beings, and then nurture life at an optimal level. So we can see how profound this process is. When we go to the garden, we start to find who we really are. Who we really are as human beings. We begin to ask ourselves, who am I? The critical question, who am I? And from who am I, who are we? Who are we as a community? But let's start first with who am I? What is the human being? What is life? Those eternal questions at the base of many philosophical systems. But empirically, I like to go back to the garden to find answers. So, who am I? Who is the human being? What is the human being? And the human being is a complex. Let me start first at a biological level, because to address that question, what is the human being? We can address it at a biological level, at a psychological level, or spiritual levels, and the garden as well. And we'll cover all those levels. But they all are part of the same. It's just a matter of different perspectives. We look at the human being, and as I'm talking to you now, I'm using certain words. I have certain feelings about myself and your presence here. So there is biology going on. There are neurotransmitters going on through my neuron cells and the synaptic connections going on. But at the same time, I experience thoughts. I generate thoughts, or I receive them, or I transform them, and I produce them, and I feed them to you, and vice versa. I'm fed with your energy fields. And psychologically, I coexist biologically in a way that cannot be separated, but only by looking at it and describing it in words. Then there's a spiritual level beyond. So there's biological levels, looking at biology, psychological and spiritual levels. With this I refer to my intention to connect with the field of all possibilities, with the universal field of divine consciousness, which I have, so that we can all receive optimal processes that we can use in our daily lives. So all this is happening right here, right now. And we are observing ourselves in the garden at a biological level, psychological and spiritual levels. At a biological level, who we are complex living organisms, fundamentally. And we have learned to interact with the environment in which we live. And I'm talking phylogenetically. The process of development of a species, as to this point, where we are now, we have a long learning process. And we have encoded that learning at a genetic level over millions of years of existence. Then we recapitulate that phylogenetical development in the embryological development as well. But fundamentally, we have been interacting with the environment in which we live. Sometimes we assimilate the environment, we are more active. Sometimes we accommodate to the environment, we are more passive. But we adapt. There is a mechanism of adaptation to the environment in which we live. And from this mechanism of adaptation, we generate internal states of equilibrium. We have learned to maintain an internal equilibrium. This is called homeostasis. the maintenance of an internal equilibrium. We maintain the quantity and quality of blood in our systems, the level of glucose in blood. So many variables that we maintain within certain ranges. And if we vary and neglect to maintain those, we suffer. As a consequence, we develop various degenerative processes leading to illness and eventually to death. So the quality of our adaptation to the environment brings about a quality of internal medium, internal equilibrium. And this is at a biological level what we do as human beings. So we assimilate, and we assimilate fundamentally through food. That's a major portion of the variance explaining who we are, food. Because without food, it's difficult to exist. So by going to the garden, we recognize that food is medicine, and that we can recognize the methods to cultivate, to create optimal food for human beings. At a biological level as well, we human beings sometimes assimilate, sometimes accommodate, we adapt. But what we integrate is fundamentally energy. And we integrate and assimilate and integrate energy through food. But there are other ways in which we assimilate and integrate energy. We integrate energy through light, exposure to light. As a matter of fact, if we are deficient in light, sometimes we can die. There were studies done by the Germans in the bunkers. The German soldiers could not survive more than a month in a German bunker. They would decay. They would die. They had to keep them in rotations. This is not in the military forces. So we are more dependent on light than we think. And so we can assimilate energy through light the same that the garden does. It's the terrain, but it's the light. And there is a lot to learn that comes with the light, because the rays that come to us, those rays of light and warmth, contain as well, encoded in them, knowledge. Contains knowledge that is passed on to molecules, to organisms. And we'll talk more about that at a psychological and spiritual levels. So we integrate energy through light, food, light, and obviously air, the quality of our air, the quality of our breath, how we breathe, and the exchange that happens in lungs, and the motion that it creates internally. Listen to your breath now. Notice what happens when you breathe. It creates pressure as well. As you breathe, the energy goes down, the air goes down, and this pressure creates various motions around internal organs and systems. And then as you exhale, contracts. So we go from expansion to contraction, from contraction to expansion, in a continuous, endless process. That is breathing. There's more to it. We'll practice later on, some more. Just become one with your breathing. Return to the garden. create optimal terrain. Avail yourself to the knowledge of the light. Become in touch with the natural process of breathing. Powerful statements here. You can use a lifetime investigating. Use them. Use them in your daily life. And organisms that we are, we integrate energy, assimilate, transform, and discharge. That's what we do, organisms do. Assimilate, transform, and discharge. Additional forms of energy, the exposure to all elements around us. I'm talking about the wind, temperatures, climatic changes, that creates different energetic configurations in your organism. The change of the seasons, study the change of the seasons, learn about the seasons, see what it brings, what difference does it make in every season, what can you cultivate that fits you best, what can you learn from each season. In the garden, you start first learning. Where are you going to learn that? You start learning about it best in the garden, the cycles of seasons. Yeah. The various foods that it produces, and how you prepare them as well. Because there is an entire process of learning how to recognize food in the garden. Recognize it. Then select. Then combine. There are optimal combinations for human beings. Other combinations are not so optimal. Because we, organisms that we are, have different levels of enzymes. And each person is different. And so there are certain groups of foods that are hard to digest. And others not so hard. Others are simple to digest and beneficial for regeneration. Others create difficulties and high levels of toxic metabolic waste. So let us learn to identify foods, how to identify them, put them together in optimal groups, in optimal combinations, how to prepare them, what methods we use for cooking. We can perhaps then later on talk a little bit more about it. And how to prepare it, and how to chew. How to chew. Learn about your chewing. Become one with your chewing. Then you will know the food. You will know the food and you will know yourself. Because what happens in chewing is this. The maxillars and the tongue are charging. You are creating, activating your field. And this energy goes to your food and you assimilate it, it becomes you. And the intention that you put, the end intention becomes also part of the food. So if you have a loving attitude when you eat, an attitude of gratefulness, an attitude of thankfulness, a loving attitude, because it comes to you as food that comes to you through the order of nature, then you bring that energy into the food. You become conscious. You chew, you charge it, and it becomes you. You become the food. So chewing is fundamental. I would recommend that you chew until everything is liquid. Very important if you want to obtain health, optimal health, and regenerate from illness. Chew every mouthful until it becomes liquid. It might take you 100 times, whichever number. In some of the classes that I teach on the fundamentals of natural medicine and Sojin Ryori Do, cooking for self-transformation, I have chewing practice. That's very much part of it. Not only selecting the food, but then preparing it and chewing. And oftentimes I instruct people to go over 100 chewing motions over a good mouthful of brown rice. Have that experience until everything goes down in liquid. And the particles you keep projecting forward. So there you go. Then the saliva comes. And it becomes so much saliva that you either swallow or you consciously resist the swallowing and contract. You bring your tongue to the roof, that bolus, you contract it, and the juices come on the side. It creates like a river, and you let it come throughout your gastrointestinal system all the way to intestinal area. And then you'll have an opportunity, then the enzymes can intervene at the right time, digest it optimally, and absorb the nutrients optimally. Now you keep putting that bolus there and chewing, chewing, chewing until you get the outer layer of the grain, the outer layer of genmai, brown rice. Zen and Japanese know a great deal about brown rice. And so let us chew grains, let us chew food, and everything fluid, and keep projecting the bolus so that the last part of the grain becomes the outer layer, which is rich in protein. You notice the carbohydrate, it turns sweet in your mouth, and the protein, the outer layer, and the minerals are still there. Keep chewing. Use that practice. Then, additional ways in which we integrate energy. Movement. We can move, and various movements and various postures bring about certain energy effects in the human organism. And therefore, and thereby, human beings have learned to devise movements in the traditional practices of yoga, in the practices of Qigong, Tai Chi Qigong, and many others, using movement to regenerate internal organs and systems. So all those are ways that we can use to regenerate ourselves, and they can be best learned as we return to the garden. Let me just check the times because I have so much to cover. Okay. Let us stay there for an understanding of who we are. At a psychological level, we also the quality of our thoughts, emotions, feelings, that creates energy effects. So, learned around the garden to generate thoughts of gratitude, thoughts of thankfulness, of gratefulness, loving thoughts, and transmit them to the seeds, to the plants, and observe what happens. Observe what happens. Seeds grow into phenomenal plants. Phenomenal. They reward you. They become one with the spirit of love. And they reward you. They become magnificent plants. If you go to Europe, there are many things to see. But one that I will recommend is to visit two places. One, I would say, is Tornach. in Switzerland, the headquarters of what I would call the father of ecology, Steiner, Rudolf Steiner, the generator of the anthroposophical movement. Among the various contributions, biodynamic agriculture systems. This is within organic agriculture. Some of the most advanced forms of agriculture in which we integrate the cosmos into the garden. So go to Dornach and observe the gardens there, what they grow. Another hint. Go to Findhorn, Scotland, and observe the gardens. Read about it beforehand, so that you know how human beings can relate to plants and the rewards that we get in terms not only of food, but in terms of knowledge. Because, and now we go again to the garden at a psychological and spiritual level. Plants. Plants are beings, much as we are. Surprise, huh? Trees, every plant is an outer manifestation of our spirit, of a spirit being. Very close to what we are. We are spirit beings that have become materialized. That's what we are, fundamentally. I'm talking about a biological level, an organism, but we are spirit beings who have decided to materialize. And there are other beings that decide to materialize as plants. Interesting, huh? Then learn. Doesn't it make sense that we want to establish some kind of communication because we are so closely linked to plants on this planet Earth? We want to cultivate some kind of an interaction with these spirit beings, don't we? We need to know who we are by, and through cooperation, asking, what do they need? What do they need? Ask plants, what do you need? And guess what? You'll find out. You'll get the answer. You'll get the answer around the garden. Without fail. It will pop up to you. These spirit beings are magnificent. They have ways of communication, subtle ways, that are exquisite. Also, as you learn to observe the processes of growth in the seed, growth and development and blossoming and flourishing, and all the way to the opposite, as you learn to observe the process of decay, withering, both, because they are part of the same cycle, then we develop organs of perception. Organs of perception. Not ordinary consciousness. They are additional organs of perception that enables you to understand what plants are. That enable you to understand what human beings really are. That enable you to communicate and be participant of a hierarchy of spirit beings. Celestial hierarchies of spirit beings. And you know and understand your placement, your position. Because there are mighty beings out there. There are mighty beings that are helping humanity. Helping humanity in our development, in our transformation as human species. And there are also, by the way, other spirit beings that are not so benevolent, not so friendly. Let me just say that in passing, not to scare anyone, but just to be aware. And that these other beings present difficulties. And their functions seem to present obstacles and difficulties. So we learn through these organs of perception to recognize who are our allies, who are inspiring, guiding, and indeed protecting humanity. And we can do best, we can learn about that best when we return to the garden, because we develop those organs of perception. Then in our meditation practices, particularly around the garden, but in nature in general. When I'm talking about the garden, it's nature, right? But the garden is an ecological garden. It gives direction to your contemplation. It gives direction because it gently guides you into what is most important first. What is most important first. So you learn to discern and learn to navigate in this ocean of the cosmos of mighty spirit beings. And we learn as a family of human species to align ourselves with those who actively engage in helping human beings to attain higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of functioning towards the attainment of enlightenment or realization, to know as much as there is to know, and then be fully participant of the process of creation at a global, massive scale, but right here, right now, to be fully participant in the garden. There we can learn. A few more details, since we are in Christmas, in this corner of the universe in which we are. There's a vast universe out there. And I'm borrowing the knowledge and words of Rudolf Steiner. In this corner of the universe in which we are, there is a master plan. There is a master plan for humanity and for planet Earth. Let it be known there is a master plan. We either ignore it, or we want to learn and recognize it and actually become involved. We can go against it or with it. It's like when you are navigating out there and there is high winds and currents and tides. You can either learn to recognize all these factors to go to your destination, or if you ignore them, you might just succumb. That is the reality. But in this corner of the universe, there are a number of hierarchies. And there are 13 beings, 13 bodhisattvas that decide to come and materialize on planet Earth from time to time. Every so many thousands of years, decide to materialize to teach certain qualities to humanity. These are bodhisattvas that, when they materialize, become Buddhas. I align myself with the medicine Buddha, the medicine Buddha Vaidurya Tara. I like to bring this because the medicine Buddha Vaidurya Tara is such that there is male and female. And recognizing the beauty of both, in this case, female, Vaidurya Tara. Tara is referred as she who saves in the Buddhist tradition. This goes back again to the garden, the matrix, the terrain. That matrix and terrain is she who saves, that feeds us food, like our mother's food, and energy and knowledge. It's in the garden that we learn best. And so, but these 12 bodhisattvas sit in contemplation around a 13th one. And this 13th one function is just to be there, be as the spirit being who radiates the substance of wisdom and love itself. And as these 12 bodhisattvas contemplate, they become impregnated and in turn decide to materialize and teach humanity over the epochs of transformation in humanity. So it's important to know that we are not alone, that we are guided, and that we can avail ourselves to the power of nature if we know how to approach it, because there is an optimal angle. This brings us to the next step around the ecological garden, which is we can develop food optimal for human beings regenerating themselves and regenerating the society in which we live. Beginning first with the human being, the family, around the gardens, communities, and societies. Simple continuum. It's around the garden that we receive light. Well, that light and other aspects of nature can be harnessed to create free energy systems. Energy systems that would help human beings to become self-sufficient. Self-sufficient in terms of energy production. This is a very strong statement because as local communities regain control of the means of production of food, we regain freedom. As local communities regain control of the means of production of clean energy systems, we regain freedom. Freedom from the 1%. The 1% that controls the energy systems in this world and that oppress the rest for their benefit in disregard of human beings and almost solely for their greed. We are talking about the corporate states system, nation system in which we live, that we have been over generations. This is the 1% behind governments, controlling energy systems. The peaceful revolution starts within, recognizing who we really are, and then returning to the garden, regaining control of the means of production of food, regaining control of the means of production of clean energy systems, renewable, distributed energy systems. So let us put the best of our minds to that undertaking. We already have cases in which communities can be entirely self-sufficient. Not only self-sufficient, but create an excellent, because the energy is so abundant, you know how to harness it. You create an abundance and you become prosperous, because there is plenty of food, there is plenty of energy, and you can pass it to neighboring communities. This is the peaceful revolution that starts with a community around gardens. And these communities, these ecological communities, become so successful, so optimal in their functioning, that guess what? Surrounding communities want to become likewise. And organically, the revolution spreads. This is the optimal way to go about. from within. There are also ways of organizing ourselves in the community, optimal ways of organizing ourselves and participating within the structures in society, the political structures, yes. Those who have knowledge for the betterment of humanity, those who have knowledge for the regeneration of the environment and the transformation of human beings must participate and be empowered. Regain the power, participate. Those communities on the basis of the merit, the proposals that are presented by the members of the community. They can elect representatives. They can organize themselves and they can make a difference for themselves to protect what they have and for others who need as well the optimal development that certain communities have developed, have attained. So much to say. It's now 9:08. Let me take, I had planned to take a specific case of regeneration. A case that human beings suffer tremendously, in which there is a lot of suffering. The case of cancer. Cancer. The equation of cancer. I wanted to address that equation and how it can be solved, the equation of cancer. But we might have to leave it for another time.
Can you give us the 10-minute version?
Yeah, give us a minute version.
I have a question before you go there, if you don't mind. It's just about what you're talking about with the 1% and food. And do you think that this 1% also controls and regulates some of the low vibrational food that is mass produced for us to sort of not give us the nutrition that helps to produce the intelligence? And also, do you think that these otherworldly entities or invisible entities are also working with the government or the 1% in collaboration to also malnourish societies?
Yeah, the 1% that controls energy systems also controls the food industry, also controls healthcare systems, communication systems. They control the mechanisms of power and manipulation, but yes, indeed, is the industry, the mechanistic industry of food that is so polluted, is so perversively polluted at all levels with chemicals, fertilizers, herbicides, colorants, genetically altering organisms. The entire thing, it becomes unrecognizable. Aren't we surprised that we develop cancer when we, as species, develop that kind of food loaded with chemicals? Furthermore, water systems. Well, yeah, let me address the equation of cancer. Water, the massive use of chemicals in the food production, the massive use of chemicals in industry since the Industrial Revolution, the progressive degeneration of the biosphere. Most of it remains in the fields, but with the progressive rains goes into the aquifers. Cars, right?
Chemtrails.
Chemtrails.
Thank you.
Cars are leaking all the time. There's motor oil, oil-bearing grease, water runoff tons and tons of these oils and oil-bearing grease go to the aquifer systems. Then we drink that water. Guess what? We have identified now motor oil, oil-bearing grease, where? In people's kidneys, in livers and kidneys. We identified motor oil, oil-bearing grease, and many other toxic substances, but that's how it comes. So water, in the equation of cancer, water is a major factor that accounts for a major portion of the variance. But there's more about the history of water. Water is polluted in the aquifers, but then we bring it up, we distribute it. Well, the process of distribution adds other layers of contamination. Because we as human beings, we give it, we just do not question the addition of the materials to the water. Chlorine that is added, fluoride, chlorine account for a major portion, a major participant in the development of cancer. Because chlorine is not NSF chlorine. NSF chlorine is the one that is being certified that even though it's toxic, at least it doesn't produce cancer. It produces many other illnesses, but not cancer. But some local water authorities think that all chlorine is equal. Not so. NSF chlorine is difficult to handle because it becomes in large crates and so on. So what is easy is to go to the major supermarkets and buy bottles of Clorox bleach. Clorox bleach is heavily polluted with metals, with the lanthanides, with anti-corrosives to protect the water pipes. Furthermore, anti-corrosives are added at every station where we have identified one molecule, one cancer complex that is at the core of the tumor formation. And that is cerium, polonium, potassium, ferrocyanide. This is a complex molecule that becomes attached to other toxic elements around the cancer. Imagine links of this main molecule with other toxic elements, among them solvents, benzene, toluene, xylene, metals, mercury, nickel, cadmium, copper, chromium, and all the lanthanides. And PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, are there interacting. So this initial molecule becomes a bit more complex, and this constitutes a terrain. Let's go back to the garden. This is a terrain that we bring in, a foreign, nasty terrain. A terrain that attracts a unique profile of parasites into the human organism. So we have a terrain made of complex toxic elements that interacts with a number of parasites, and in the normal circumstances we can dislodge and eliminate. But when we provide a terrain for them to survive, they spread. They spread and become participants of the nucleus of the tumor. And they provide the vital energy along with other toxic chemicals that bring about an eclosion of cells. Eclosion. I refer to the dismemberment of cells. They become loose from various organs. But we have identified now a sequence. That sequence starts in the hypothalamus. A group of phenols, sort of like allergic-like substances, accumulate in the hypothalamus, and certain cells become loose and go in the cardiovascular system. That happens when there is chlorogenic acid accumulated in hypothalamus,
Right.
in conjunction with a parasite that migrates to hypothalamus, Strongyloids stercalis. Then, the next stage, down below, in the pituitary, an accumulation of a number of toxic elements, among them fluoritsin, another highly allergic substance, and all these toxic elements bring about the eclosion of cells from the pituitary into the cardiovascular systems. Now we have these cells that they come and form duplets or duplexes, and they are in the torrent cardiovascular system. Then other group of toxic elements that accumulate in the pancreas, along with a parasite that migrates because of the existence of those toxic elements, and that parasite is Erythrema pancreaticum. In the pituitary gland, I didn't mention the parasite, is Clonorchis sinensis. It's a flatworm of the family of Phaseolopsis busci. It's a nasty parasite. Erythrema pancreaticum is also the Phaseolopsis busci, but is tropic or synergistic to the pancreas. And then there's these cells that become loose into the cardiovascular system, and they form this sequence: hypothalamus, pituitary, pancreas, triplexes. These triplexes go in the cardiovascular system, and then another organ becomes, over the course of many years, we create an internal terrain of toxicity. That organ is going to become the recipient of the nucleus of the tumor, a fourth organ, whether it is the breast, whether it is the colon, whatever it might be, an accumulation of toxic elements in which there is Phaseolopsis busci, there is the progressive accumulation of the cerium, potassium, ferrocyanide, cerium, polonium, potassium, ferrocyanide, and other toxic elements, and stem cells that become loose. Then the triplexes come and form the tumor of the nucleus. This tumor of the nucleus needs to be fed to develop. That's good news. So the terrain that we create internally feeds that tumor. If we continue feeding it, it will grow, and it will eventually metastasize and kill you in the sequence of cancer. The good news: return to the garden. Return to the garden. Learn to use the foods, optimal foods, for progressively detoxifying yourself. So, this is the massive equation of cancer. How to solve it? Let's return to the garden. Food. A combination of foods creates the basis for optimal regeneration sequences in the human organism. And we have identified certain groups of foods that facilitate that process of discharge. We have identified by now certain groups of foods that you don't want to use because they feed the eclosion of cells and they feed the process of tumor formation. So you will have to, because you're running against time, to learn to identify those foods to avoid. We have, from the garden, cultivated plants, and we have recognized what? We have recognized weeds. When you attend to a garden, there are weeds. But many of those weeds are medicinal plants. Learn to recognize the medicinal plant. Don't discard them. Don't go there, right? Because those are medicinal plants that you can use. You can furthermore, you can cultivate your own medicinal plants in your own garden. So we have identified a unique program, a series of protocols to discharge toxic elements, first from kidneys and liver. Because if you are about to discharge toxicity from your system, you want to have those two organs in particular, first as clean and in an optimal function as much as possible. Protocols to regenerate gastrointestinal system with food, but also other plants. And then including certain enemas, because the villi, our roots, have become so locked. They have become almost unable to affect their function because they have a layer, rubbery layer, really literally like leather rubber of a dark color that accumulates. And through certain enemas, you, formed by yourself, your own equipment, you can discharge those leathery, rubbery materials from the walls of your intestines and cleanse internally. You can regenerate your kidneys, you can regenerate your liver and other organs. You can regenerate your immune system. Because the immune system, the beautiful harmony, the beautiful orchestra of the immune system with the white blood cells and the different subsets are going to go through the tissues, identifying the toxic elements, and removing them kidneys out. So we need to nourish and regenerate the immune system. Particularly, we need to feed white blood cells. We need to feed them with optimal food that we can grow in our gardens. And that food for human beings, highly needed because they are logged. They are heavy. They are heavy with metals. They are heavy with metals. They can barely move in cancer cases, in many other illnesses as well, but in cancer cases they are heavily polluted with metals. And so we can feed them, and we can also feed them a frequency. This is technology. I call it macrobiotic technology, because we human beings can feed the light, can feed food, plants, and also we can identify frequencies because our organisms have become materialized in a morphogenetic field around an energy field. And this energy field can be fed through certain frequencies. And these frequencies can oxidize toxic elements and can further activate toxic elements in the white blood cells and can activate them when they are fed, and they turn them into athletes, into high caliber athletes that go to the various organs and systems, identifying the toxic elements, neutralizing the parasites. By the way, these frequencies also have the ability to neutralize parasites. And there are many people here that have contributed, some of the brightest and best minds of humanity. But let me identify one of the, it starts with Rudolf Steiner, of course, and many others, but in the closest contemporary, Dr. Clark. Let us pay homage and recognize the great contribution for humanity. She should be rewarded with a Nobel Prize, because this is not my knowledge. I've participated over 15 years in close contact with Dr. Clark, so I understand, integrated the knowledge, and I can articulate it in an optimal way so they can be easily learned and applied. But the reward and the recognition is to Dr. Clark. So that's for the equation of cancer. We can regenerate it. We can also use additional practices of meditation, Qigong practice. Why? Because the equation of cancer, I just described it at a biological level. But there are psychological, spiritual factors as well. At a psychological level, let me summarize it. I think the person who best summarizes is Dr. Hammer. But Dr. Hammer would say that is an internalized, unresolved conflict that produces anger. Internalized, unresolved conflict that produces anger and that is kept in silence. That at a psychological level. So thereby, we want to, human beings that we are, we can help other human beings. We can enable them with methods so they can unknot that highly tied knot that is kept in silence. And it's best unknotted by returning to the garden, by practicing Qigong in the garden, by meditating in the garden. Then you receive higher guidance. Receive higher guidance to understand how you can dissolve that conflict. At a spiritual level, by going to the garden, also the problem in cancer at a spiritual level is a disconnection at some level with the spiritual realm. Disconnection in the spiritual realm, particularly through nature. There's a disconnection there. So through these simple practices, human beings can learn to reconnect through nature and through their own heritage and background to spiritual knowledge. But it's around the garden, as I described, through the light that we receive and through observation and meditation practice that we can learn to best cultivate those aspects to reconnect. So that is the solution of the equation of cancer. Now, just in ending, because time is moving forward, I have brought, I don't know which one to share with you. There's a document that I presented to the European Union that I'm quite proud of, but I'll leave that for another time. Or I'll hang it eventually on a website so you can learn. But it's basically what I said, what can be said, what can be presented to the European Union in a sequence in terms of how to apply the code Return to the Garden for the regeneration of human beings and the development of optimal sustainable development. But I would like to end by going back to who we are as human beings, and the cultivation of our breath. As you learn to become one with your breathing, as you learn to return to the garden, you have the most fundamental tools for self-transformation. I had the privilege to interact with Maya Wan Ho, a brilliant scientist, brilliant, exquisite scientist that understands organisms like few people do. And by borrowing on her knowledge, I coined a description of what life is at a biological level. I think can be described as, in two words, quantum jazz. Quantum jazz. Quantum jazz is the metaphor for the quantum coherence of organisms, in which every single molecular player in organisms is spontaneous and free, yet perfectly in step and in tune with the whole. That is quantum coherence of organisms. This remarkable state of being depends on the liquid crystalline water matrix. Yes, this remarkable state of being depends on the liquid crystalline water matrix. We have to develop clean water. It's clear, right? That enables liquid crystalline water matrix that enables each molecule to intercommunicate with every other, creating that exquisite light and sound displays that span 70 octaves in all the colors of the rainbow. Yes, the water matrix, the liquid crystalline water matrix is the matrix of life. That is where the knowledge from light begins to be transmitted to molecules, and all molecules to interact with each other and develop into organisms. That is life at a biological level. And it is fundamental that we as a community regain control of the means of production of food and clean energy systems, beginning with water. It's fundamental that we address that issue once and for all. And therefore, I am proposing a project. I am proposing an ecological communities project in which we can all participate. And I will leave for those who want to participate in various aspects, that you feel inspired to join me in this process. I will live here. And clean the water systems, particularly the water that we drink in this community, once and for all. For that matter, I am proposing a community discussion event for the entire East End, the entire Hamptons, the entire East End. Something similar to what we did last year in January, addressing issues of open government and the influence of money in politics. But this time on a specific issue, clean water systems for this community. And so you will hear, probably will be this time at the beginning of February, you will hear about this matter. Come, support it, participate. It will probably be held at the Bay Street Theater. So keep that in mind, open for February, the first or second week. Then, for the development of the Ecological Communities project, we are presenting a group of ecological technologies that people can acquire to apply to their homes, including clean energy systems. This is a company that I'm developing. But I'm also working with not-for-profit organizations, and we will be presenting shortly educational programs for people to train around the garden, to be able to live this code and bring it home. We are going to address it also to the schools as well. So you'll hear about it. And this is an extension of the courses that I was initially teaching at Long Island University French World Program, that our dear friend and magician Scott Chasky was participant, teaching natural organic agriculture systems. So we want to incorporate those programs again for the community, particularly schools, and for everyone who wants to incorporate it in their homes. There will be also a Qigong class that I'm going to teach Saturdays and Wednesdays at Long Beach at 10 in the morning. There's going to be also a Zen walk in the Global Garden, a Zen walk in which, in silence, we learn to recognize the messages of nature and the power of light. And it might be in the Northwest Woods, and there are some paths over there that we can use. And there is also participation at a political level for those of you who are adventurers and have a fire in the belly. Yes, there is Occupy Wall Street, and there is Occupy the Hamptons, and there is Occupy Love. Please go to those websites in that order to participate to the extent that you would like to. Is Ty here? Did she make it? This brilliant lady, Ty? No, she couldn't make it this time. All right, so that will be enough for the Occupy to participate at a political level. And we'll invite all elected representatives, again, to the community discussion event to solve once and for all the water, this crystalline, liquid crystalline water matrix that we are, that organisms are, has to be clean. Nothing but clean, thoroughly clean. And this is the beginning of the Ecological Communities project around community-supported agriculture, individual gardens, and clean energy systems, construction technologies that are non-toxic, and health care and education systems that grow around the garden. So I think that's enough for tonight. I thank you very much for your coming, and keep yourselves in good health, and I will see you soon.
Are you aware of the group of 100 people that went to Suffolk County to request that Suffolk County legislature pass laws to stop chemtrails?
Yes, and I will.
In that group?
On the periphery, but I am, and I'm very happily rewarded that there are people that through their actions can make a significant difference. And we have been assaulted through chemtrails in this community and throughout the nation, so there's a major development. The same decision that Suffolk County adopted, we can have a water act that can be passed once and for all to safeguard water systems in this county.
What did they adopt? As far as the chemtrails are concerned, they adopted something?
Yes, they adopt an act to ban these chemtrails.
They did?
They did.
Because I only saw the beginning. I didn't see the
Yeah, it was presented in front of the legislative body and it was passed.
I saw the video, right.
Mm-hmm. So those are good news, and similarly, we can
Well,
do
of course.
more.
We're dealing with layers,
Yeah,
so they can adopt any law they want as long as, not saying that they're going to have any control over it.
it's a step forward, but at least these people that are behind the law can exert control on those representatives, and we have to maintain ourselves vigilant. We cannot let representatives do the job. It doesn't work that way. We cannot just vote every 4 years and write letters to the editors. No, we know it does not work. We have to be active participants in the community.
Michael, what kind of water filtration system would you recommend for someone to just put in their home for clean water for the showers or for boiling eggs or pasta or whatever?
Yeah. I recommend, and I've done a great deal of research on this matter, a whole house filtration system.
Well, that's expensive though.
It's a heavy duty, but canister, about this level with additional
Is there a specific
canisters. They cost about between $2,500, around that figure, but it's the best investment that you will do in your house. If you move, you can bring it along with you. That will be the best investment, safeguard for your health.
What is it called?
It's a whole house filtration system.
So he's not recommend, no brand.
Well, I have a number of them that I will recommend, but obviously I'm not going to mention that now. But I will put this information out through my website, which is in construction, and is naturalhealthmethods.org. naturalhealthmethods.org. I will hang it out over there. And you are welcome to call, and later on I will share with you this information.